If you're sitting at your kitchen table right now with a cup of coffee, maybe your checkbook open, maybe a stack of mail you've been avoiding because every envelope feels heavier than it used to, I want you to listen very closely because what I'm about to share is not just another Social Security update. It's a New Year reality check that could directly change how much money shows up in your account when it arrives and what the government quietly expects you to do next. And I'm saying this up front because over the past 2 weeks, I've heard from hundreds of seniors named people like Margaret in Ohio who told me she assumed her January payment would be the same as December, and then nearly panicked when the deposit was different. Or Frank in Arizona, who thought a letter from the SSA was junk mail and almost missed a deadline that could have cost him benefits for months. And that's why today we're breaking down 10 major changes hitting Social Security retirement, SSI and SSDI checks right now as the new year begins. Changes that are already in motion, already affecting real people, and in some cases already reducing or increasing checks by amounts that matter when you're counting every dollar. Because this is not theory. This is what's happening on the ground at the SSA as 2026 begins, and the system resets in ways most people don't fully understand. So let's start with the first and most obvious change. Everyone thinks they understand, but very few actually do: the New Year Cost of Living Adjustment, or COLA. Because while the headline number gets all the attention, what really matters is how it plays out in your net check, not the gross number you see on paper. And here's where a lot of seniors are getting tripped up. Because yes, there is a COLA increase applied to Social Security, retirement, and SSDI checks this year. And yes, SSI rates were adjusted as well. But what many people don't realize is that the timing of when that increase actually shows up depends on your benefit type, your payment schedule, and whether you had Medicare premiums adjusted at the same time. Because for millions of retirees, especially those enrolled in Medicare Part B, the COLA is being partially offset by a higher premium deduction that quietly kicked in on January 1st, meaning some people are seeing a smaller increase than expected, and some are seeing no increase at all compared to December. And that has caused confusion, frustration, and even fear because seniors budget around those numbers months in advance. And when the deposit doesn't match expectations, it feels like the rug is being pulled out from under you, and that leads directly into the second change, which is the recalculation of Medicare Part B and Part D deductions that now apply to Social Security checks automatically because the SSA and CMS sync their systems at the start of the year, and any income-related adjustment, known as IRMA, can suddenly show up as a bigger deduction even if your income didn't change recently. Since these determinations are based on older tax data, usually from 2 years ago, and I've spoken with retirees who were shocked to see an extra $80, $90, even $150 missing from their January deposit, not because of a mistake, but because the system updated silently. And unless you open that Medicare notice or log into your My Social Security account, you may not even realize why your check changed, which brings us to the third major change. And this one is especially important for SSI recipients and low-income seniors, because the federal SSI payment rate resets every January, and while the increase is modest on paper, the rules around countable income, in-kind support, and state supplements also reset at the same time. And that means some people are seeing changes not just in the amount they receive, but in their eligibility altogether, especially those who had small changes in living arrangements, help from family, or even utility assistance, because the SSI program is extremely sensitive to changes that may feel minor to you, but are big in the eyes of the SSA. And I want to stress this because every year we see seniors unintentionally report something late or misunderstand what counts as income, and then get hit with an overpayment notice months later, which leads to stress, repayment demands, and long phone calls with SSA representatives. And that ties directly into change number 4, which is the SSA's increased use of automated reviews and data matching at the start of the year, because as 2026 begins, the agency runs fresh comparisons between Social Security records, IRS income data, Medicare enrollment, and state assistance programs. And if anything doesn't line up, the system flags your account, and that can trigger a letter, a temporary suspension, or a request for verification. And here's the part that makes this feel urgent. Those letters often look generic. They don't scream emergency, and they arrive during a time when people are distracted by holidays, travel, or simply overwhelmed, and missing a response deadline, even unintentionally, can cause benefits to pause, which is devastating when Social Security or SSI is your primary source of income. And that's why change number 5 matters so much, because the SSA has adjusted its communication methods again this year, placing even more emphasis on online notices and my Social Security accounts, meaning some information that used to arrive by mail may now be delivered digitally. And if you've never set up an online account or you rarely log in, you might miss important updates about your benefits, your payment amount, or required actions. And I've heard from seniors who didn't realize their mailing preference had changed, or that a notice was considered delivered simply because it was posted online. And that creates a real risk for older Americans who are not comfortable with technology or who assume paper mail is still the default. Which brings us to change number 6, the adjustment to payment schedules and deposit timing that happens every new year. Because while Social Security, retirement, and SSDI payments generally follow the same Wednesday schedule based on birth date, the calendar itself changes things. And when the first of the month falls on a weekend or a federal holiday, SSI payments are often issued early, sometimes in late December, and that can create the illusion of an extra check when in reality, it's just the January payment arriving ahead of time. And this is critical because some people spend that money assuming another payment is coming soon, only to find themselves short later in the month. And this year's calendar creates exactly that kind of confusion for certain SSI recipients, especially those who rely on every single dollar to cover rent, groceries, and utilities. And that leads naturally into change number 7, which is the ongoing adjustment to overpayment recovery policies. Because while the SSA has faced criticism for aggressive recovery in the past, they are still moving forward with reclaiming billions in overpaid benefits. And at the start of the year, new repayment schedules often begin, meaning some people are seeing a portion of their check withheld, sometimes 10%, sometimes more, depending on the agreement. And what makes this especially painful is that many overpayments were not the recipient's fault, but the money still has to be repaid unless you successfully request a waiver or appeal. And the new year is when many of those recovery actions restart or increase, catching people off guard, which brings us to change number 8, the updated earnings limits for those who are still working while receiving Social Security retirement benefits, because every January the earnings threshold resets, and for those under full retirement age, earning even $1 over the limit can trigger benefit withholding, while those at or above full retirement age face different rules. And I've spoken with seniors who picked up extra holiday work or continued part-time jobs into the new year without realizing the limits had changed, and then were shocked to see reduced checks later, not understanding why. And this is especially relevant right now as inflation pressures push more retirees back into the workforce just to make ends meet. And that ties directly into change number 9, which is the quiet update to disability review priorities affecting SSDI recipients. Because while the SSA insists that most people will not see increased scrutiny, the reality is that continuing disability reviews, known as CDRs, often ramp up at the start of a new year, especially for certain categories. And while that doesn't mean benefits are automatically at risk, it does mean more paperwork, more requests for medical documentation, and more stress for people already dealing with health challenges. And missing a form or deadline can lead to suspension, even if you're still fully eligible, which is why staying alert right now matters more than ever. And finally, change number 10, and this one is both hopeful and frustrating, is the renewed political attention on Social Security, SSI, and SSDI as the new year begins, because new proposals, new promises, and new headlines are already circulating about benefit increases, minimum benefit reforms, and even one-time relief checks. And while nothing is guaranteed, what we're seeing is a surge in speculation that can create false expectations if you're not careful. And I want to be very clear here, no matter what you hear on social media or from friends, the only changes you should budget for are the ones officially applied to your account, because misinformation spreads fastest when people are anxious, and seniors deserve clarity, not confusion. And that's why I'm urging you right now, as we step into this new year, to take 3 simple but powerful steps. Review your January deposit carefully, open every letter from Social Security and Medicare, And if something doesn't make sense, act quickly, because delays are where problems grow. And I know this can feel overwhelming. I know the system feels impersonal and complex, but you are not alone in this. Millions of Americans are navigating these same changes right now, and knowledge is your strongest protection. So stay informed, stay cautious, and remember that these benefits are not gifts. They are earned, and you have every right to understand exactly what's happening with your money as this new year unfolds.